Mentioned bondage from tomfoolery, and I know I'm leaving something out, but
cupcakes.
there's and cupcakes, and bondage and cupcakes. What else do you need?
And lube.
And lube, yes.
So part of the reason, the intention for tonight is just to for different alternative communities and just kind of cross-pollinations of lots of different people.
So be thinking about that with your audience questions, like how you can create more freedom and openness in your life. And, it's about, whatever sexual freedom means for you, right?
Now, I'm going to introduce Robert,
Yeah.
because I have a fun thing to say, but do you want to just announce our panelists?
Oh my God.
You can,
okay.
And then Robert will introduce them, but you can
Right,
at least
right.
point at them and show
and
that you
say,
know who they
oh my
are.
God, these people are so fabulous. So let me get out of the way so you can see them. But, Robert, founder of the Center of Sex and Culture with Carol. Oh my God, how cool is that? Cleo Dubois founded the Center for SM Arts. Dossie Easton, everybody knows she wrote The Ethical Slut. So excited she wrote that book. Totally the reason that I started Sexploration with Monika. Deborah Anapol, Love Without Limits. Hey. Joni Blank, Familia, and the tattoos.
And Good Vibrations.
And Good Vibrations, yeah. That's
Just that little thing.
Just that one. And Tommi Avicolli Mecca, who started with the Gay Liberation Front in 1970, and I added up all the years of sexual activism and history and awesomeness that these people have been engaged in, and it's 282 years of greatness. So that actually made me be a little like, hee hee hee, I can't believe how cool my life is. So welcome to the Sex Geek Speakeasy. Robert, thank you. Take it away. I don't think that's
We're just going to listen to something.
It's still on.
So let's.
Then I'm not going to be able to actually
There's somebody checking.
blinding them, and they're going to
So-
all turn out really badly.
For Robert, since being taught about sex by his mother, who from the mid-'60s, and he has proof on his cell phone, you can ask him later, acted as a medically based sex educator in Fairfield, California. Robert Lawrence has been fascinated by sex. As an early youth and protest party member, which is called Yippie, he came to believe we can fuck ourselves into a better world. And he's been doing it ever since. He gave his first sex lecture in 1973 at the Institute for the Advanced Study of Sex in Rohnert Park, California. And by 1979 was affiliated with the San Francisco Sex Information Hotline, SFISI. He has been an associate fellow at the American Academy of Clinical Psychology. Sexology? Oh, there it is. Sexology. The past West Coast Secretary of the Society for the Scientific Study of Sex. Has been published in both lay and juried books, and was at one point the highest paid male adult sex ed movie performer in the U.S. Robert has been a safer sex educator since 1980 and is the co-founder of San Francisco Center for Sex and Culture, producing and designing sex education events of many kinds, some of which you might have attended. His work has taken him to many different countries and various locations around the U.S., including tonight, Mission Control, San Francisco. I'm going to try one more time with the mic.
Okay. Good evening, people. Welcome, folks. The panel you're looking up here has been, for the past, I suppose, about 40 years, amongst most of us, been hacking your lives. You have no idea what we have been hacking sex into the conversation, not doing our best to make sure sex stays in the conversation, and as itself, as a primary structure, as something that is honored and loved, just like a fine restaurant or just like going dancing, going and having sex is something we all have that right to. And I was early on in life. My grandfather's a drag queen from vaudeville. Yes, I have pictures of that to show that. Yes, my mother did teach sex. We have a picture of her in lingerie with an orgasm cycle behind her on a chalkboard, teaching it to a bunch of people. So you can say that I'm a legacy sex educator. And I was always the dirty little kid on the block. I was the one that, because I said sex, the people on the block would say, "You can't talk to Bobby. He's a dirty little kid." Which meant, of course, all the kids would come to me. And they would say, "What's that thing? What's that thing between a boy's legs?" And I would say, "Scrotum." Yeah, and they'd laugh. It's an inherently funny word, scrotum. Just all by itself. Let's say it. 1, 2, 3. Scrotum. we came up with? So, okay, good. Minute 60. So, part of what I've done is work with the concept of, can you hear me in the back room now?
I hope so.
Yes, we are live. Hello. I just used the old scrotum joke for those in the back room. Sorry you missed it. Have somebody else tell it to you. And they're still laughing over it. Yes. So I forgot to read my own questions. But I do know that what makes a sexual revolution is that there wasn't one. There has been a sexual revolution going on for the past about 145 or 150 years. The word sex, as you know it, has not been used as a mass noun, like, let's all have sex. That mass noun structure didn't even exist in the Oxford English Dictionary in 1984. So what we're really not doing here is having a revolution. What we're deciding is what that word means and what right of access do you have to it. The concept that sex is a mass noun didn't exist in people's minds in the United States until the late 1800s, specifically under the influence of people like, what was that organization you belonged to, Carol? Victoria Woodhull, the free love hippie. Yes, hippies did not invent free love. That's an old, tens of thousands of year old concept that was brought to the fore by women in the latest 19th century. So, as those words came together and people started talking about sexuality as something to talk about, as a concept that people do, not like what is the sex of that chicken or sex that chicken, it's something we own to ourselves. Over the next probably 50 to 100 years, that paradigm is going to be decided. So it isn't really a revolution, it's a paradigm shift. And what we're doing here is taking this information, this concept that if you don't talk about it as sex, if you talk about it as, like the person who once said to me, oh, Lord, we couldn't do sex up there, but we can do art. And if sex happens, that's okay. That sort of shame-based concept, just sex is a free word we talk about. We're carrying that torch of that information forward. And we're carrying it forward in many different manners here, in many different voices. And that's the way to do it. There are 7 billion people in the world. That means we have 7 billion sexual orientations. Each person is oriented to sex, like you have an orientation toward sex also, besides how you identify about who you want to have sex with at that given moment, depending upon, well, how high you are, how high they are, whether or not you're breathing properly, all kinds of things. So this has that. Carol's laughing. Uh-oh. I'm in trouble later. So this torch of sexuality, sensuality, eros, agape, that moment, the type of, when they talk about the Greco-Roman concept of agape as a type of sex, you have eros, that kind of stuff. Agape is the love of, and they go, it's the love of God. Well, when I'm on my knees and I'm looking at a nice dick, that's agape. Okay. So think of it as things that you see that people say sex is, you know, we don't do sex, we do performance. Well, what is the original performance? I mean, whose hand didn't reach their genitals the first chance they got in the womb? It's the first thing you do, the first performance you do is your self-performance. So the root of performance, the root of much art, go back 30,000 years in the caves of Lascaux. The caves, I'm very much looking forward to the new cave drawings, when panel drawings are finally out of Mexico. So what kind of smut they wrote there, because there's apparently 10,000 different images, and I want to see who's fucking the cactus. So I'm at my 5 minutes, and now I have to ring off with that bit of stuff. Yeah, it was a yippee. Krasner's one of my buddies. And everybody who knows Krasner's goes, yeah. Paul Krasner was the man who brought you the gerbil.
Yeah.
He wrote something in The Realist, which was a joke about gerbling. And Jesse Helms took it to the Senate floor and did it like this. And Jesse Helms waved it around on the Senate floor and said, homosexuals putting small mouths into their rectums. And it made it fact. So this list is going to walk down this way now. I'm going to hand the mic down this. This is Carol Queen. If you don't know her name, you haven't been paying attention.
Amen.
So do you want me to do my my little discussion about sexual revolutions now?
You only got 5 minutes,
okay.
Go, bro.
All right. So I really am grateful that Robert started by talking about 19th century and earlier 20th century role models. I think every generation or two or three comes on the scene and recreates things in their own image, using cultural signifiers that are current and like new to them. And there's a real tendency, especially in the US, that doesn't tell sexual history as successfully as it tells some other kinds of histories.
Like
Not that
baseball.
all the alternative histories in the United States are a little bit half-assed. You really have to look around to find the real, true alternative histories of this country and its cultures. But when you look around at sex, you have to look a little bit to find out what really went on, and it's easy to miss what happened before us. I remember when I was the teenager and the young adult who felt like we had just developed homosexuality kind of out of thin cloth and whole cloth and all that stuff, and Tommy's probably going to roll his eyes about all of this. And how extremely important to me it was to find out about prior generations wrestling and juggling with sexual identities, sexual possibilities, sex education. All of this stuff is not new. It's not going to be new in 20 or 30 years when our kids or some of our grandkids are reinventing it again. So I just want to start by saying that. I think it's important to say that. I feel like my role in all of this has been, first, to understand myself as an absolute Martian freak. Like, sex made me weird, even before I had any sex. I don't know if the same is true of any of you. Like, you're sitting there in the sticks somewhere, or in the suburbs, or wherever it was, and you're like, sex, I've got to have some. What is it exactly? And I knew that my orientation to sexuality was strange, even before I got to sexuality. And my little evil people around me, my peer group, who helped me believe that I was a freak, believed that about me too. And part of what has been important for me was to then come out into the world and realize that so many of us had upbringings like that, and to try to bridge the experience of, I am not even an American, I'm such a sexual freak, back to, wait a minute, we're all one of a kind, we're all interesting, we're all in together, we're all different. One of the things that the Center for Sex and Culture always is challenged by is that because we're a pansexual organization, people say, oh, you guys have gay stuff there, so I guess this is not for me if I'm not gay. Or, you know, oh, isn't that where lesbians do their thing? Well, I'm a gay man, I guess I shouldn't go there. Or if there's an identity that people see affiliated with the organization, and Mission Control may have a little bit of that to struggle with too, because Mission Control has varying sort of identities and orientations in certain of its events, then people who aren't that immediately think that that's a no sign. That's a you're not welcome here sign. What is it about sexuality and U.S. culture that makes us believe that? That is fundamentally an illness, you guys. That's not okay. That's not right. And none of us should believe that because space has been made for somebody who isn't just like us, that excludes us. There's something so wrong about that. So my desire from Sexual Revolution is very simply, if I have to boil it down, I could talk for 3 more hours about this. I know I don't have that time. But if I had to boil down what I try to work on and what I think is the most important, it is this notion that us being different has to separate us out from each other. I think that's so dangerous. Remember when somebody was teaching you about World War II? I don't know if you had the same geeky 6th grade teacher as I did, but he said that they said in the old days, and I don't even know it's true, we'd better hang together or assuredly they will hang us separately. Well, yeah, that kind of is the way it is oftentimes. And so I want in my writing, I want in my activism, I want in my space making around the Center for Sex and Culture, and in my liaising and running around and talking to students and anybody else that I talk to, I want to try to get people to understand how different we are and how much we need to understand ourselves as a larger sexuality community, not fractionalize off, not chip off or balkanize apart. So that's what I think is really important about Sexual Revolutions. And what I want to say as my closing moment is that Dina's got a Center for Sex and Culture e-list, and we're just going to pass it around if anybody wants to be on it who's not already on it. No pressure. and that I am so honored to be on this panel with a bunch of people who, some of whom are my heroes and have made more space for me to do what I do than I can even acknowledge. And whether or not you know it yet, the same is true for you and these people. So I'm so glad that we're all here together.
Cleo Dubois' journey into SM play started in the 1980s when she found a connection between sexuality and spirituality in underground gay clubs. I thought that was poppers.
You know, that works too. Yeah.
It was there that she learned that the negotiated sadomasochism is a valid path to self-discovery, intimacy, and healing. All that time, there were no comprehensive courses spanning negotiation and communication skills with techniques and scene dynamics for safe, sane, and consensual BDSM play. In 1995, in order to fill this gap, Cleo established the Academy of SM Arts. With her partner, Fakir Musafar, she also offers spirit and flesh, body-based shamanic community, all-day workshops, and rituals. Cleo Dubois.
Well, following Carol and Robert, woohoo. So, I didn't know, I thought I had to choose some questions. So I chose a question about consent. But really, for me, the sexual revolution started. I was raised in France, and I had zero education. My first kiss, which was stolen, I brushed my teeth for about an hour because I thought I probably could have gotten pregnant. So that's how fucking bad it was. I was 12, okay? So when I discovered through a bisexual lover who is no longer with us, the pleasure of the intense leather sexuality of the gay man in, actually I was reading Richard today who wrote about the catacomb. My eyes opened, my mind was blown. There was a woman before me named Cats on Love who gave the very first workshop on SM that I ever attended. And from then on, I just embraced that path. And why did I? Because for me it was about energy, it was about sex, it was about permission, and the energy is the sex and the permission and the exploration into intense sensation, which is something that works for many of us, combined with also gentle sensation and exploration of archetypes and who we are inside ourselves that can be brought out through role play, through embracing our dark energy. All that stuff spoke to me like, this is it, I gotta get involved. So I got very involved. And for me, I picked out the word consent on this little list that came today. As in consent, you can only give consent if you know what you're consenting to. And consent is an ongoing process. So consent is about saying yes, but not just saying yes, negotiating, hearing each other, breath, breathing, paying attention to energy. It's an ongoing process. There is no consent like, do you want a whipping? Yes, end of consent. No, it's a looking at the person, the breath, the connection between both of you, the erotic energy that is raised, all of these really magical thing. And my work is, because I've been given so much from the San Francisco community, my work is to share, to keep furthering. That's why I call myself a BDSM energy worker, more than a sex worker. So now I'm listening to what you say about differences. But for me, I focus on those explorations because it is still, what is that word? Stagnified? Not stagnified.
Stagnate.
No, made wrong.
Stigmatized.
Thank you. It is still stigmatized, and I see that in people who, you know, I did professional dominance for, 25 years, and now I teach. And one of my protege told me that she has a session with a guy who doesn't even want to come to a dungeon. She has to come to him, and he want to be caned, but he's going to have his own cane because he's afraid that the cane would show sticking out of her bag. So it is still so incredibly stigmatized, and it is really, those explorations are part of our sexuality. And for me, on a personal level, the biggest sexual exploration, and more than personal actually, was when I came out with the Leatherman, and Carol was in there at some time, was a mixing of sexuality of, like, for instance, fisting, which is really a path to God or goddess, or to you, whoever your inner god, goddess self is. It's a mixing of sexual, directly sexual interaction and pain slash pleasure and all these explorations. So to me, it all started really in France when it said, don't make war, make love. C'est ne fais pas la guerre, fais l'amour, okay? That's really how it started, but I had to get here to this country to actually start my exploration of embodying it. So again, to not look at, okay, there's a function, but really, it's not a dungeon, it's a function. But really what it is, it's a place to explore parts of you in trust, in negotiation, in communication with people you choose to do that with. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'll introduce you when you have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, just hand the microphone off to Dossie.
All right. Dossie.
Okay, Dossie Easton. Oh my.
Yeah, seriously. Don't the people
No,
in the back row
even
want
before the book.
I think the people in the back row want the microphone here.
They want the microphone?
Okay. They want to hear you
Okay,
too.
it's going to be la 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 all in the
Hello, people in the back room. Yes, we acknowledge you. We hope you've been there and having a wonderful time. Pity you couldn't make it in the front row. She didn't say that. She didn't say that. Dossie Easton. Dossie dropped out of college and moved to the Lower East Side to be a psychedelic revolutionary. She immigrated to San Francisco in 1967, a flower child in the summer of love. Dossie connected with San Francisco Sex Information in 1973, joined the leather community, and eventually became a licensed MFCC, marriage family therapist. Dossie Easton's books include The Ethical Slut, The New Bottoming Book, The New Topping Book, and Radical Ecstasy, SM Journeys to Transcendence. And even before the book, she was infamous all the way across the nation for something else.
This is
They used to call me Iron Ass Easton.
That's great.
That's it.
Who knew?
No, we do.
Actually, many knew. I want to address this. There's this question about, is spirituality a necessary part of sex education? And I know there's a lot of people in this room who have, as I have, been betrayed by what they were taught was spirituality. I was raised in a church which I left when I realized that it was morally and spiritually bankrupt, much less entirely void of sex. Well, there you are. The reason that spirituality really belongs in sex education is because sex is a spiritual act. Is there any time when we are more integrated and more at unity in ourselves and more open-hearted to another person than when we are sharing an orgasm with somebody? In that moment, are we more open than we are at any other time in our life? Are we in a state of unity with ourselves? I mean, think about that for a minute, right? We have had too much of religions that act as governments. We have had too much of religions that try to control people through shaming them and telling them that God won't like them if they touch those nice, good feeling places, right? Telling them that sex is dirty. I would like to share with you the words of Sister Wendy Beckett. Does anybody in this room know who she was? She was an art critic, Roman Catholic nun, ancient woman, tiny little woman in a habit. And she did this amazing interview with Bill Moyers, which you can find on YouTube, and I recommend you look it up. And at one point he asks her, how does she deal with being a nun and all? How does she deal with the modern art that has all this sex in it? And she says, oh, I don't think God would have given us such wonderful toys and then told us not to play with them. Yay, Sister Wendy, thank you so much. She says further, she says, some people seem to think that when God made certain parts of our bodies, he made a terrible mistake. And it's all very embarrassing, and we should cover it up and make sure that we cover up God's dreadful mistake. That is not faith, she says. Faith is that God made us. I would translate that more modern, in a more modern language and say that we are made of spirit. That's what we are. It's not what we carry, it's not what we have in us, it is us. animating force of the universe. That's why we are alive. You know, that's how we grew. We are what spirit is. And sex is a wonderful, wonderful way to open up our awareness of what that spirit is. And in sex, as some of you may know, I include an awful lot in my definition of sex, but sex can be any kind of an edgy journey. I used to go backpacking way up in the Sierra, and one of the interesting things for me on the top of some sort of pass at 11,800 feet is that I feel vertigo right in my crotch. Very interesting form of sex, having sex with the mountain range. I know it's a long time practically before we will have sexuality included in sex education. I know that that's not going to go over really big in the schools. But on the other hand, I think it is tremendously important politically that we raise our voices against the churches that would control people through shame, that would oppress people by telling them that God doesn't like them if they like pleasure, would tell people that their bodies are dirty, and that is what is sacred and holy, is to not have a body and not be on this planet. And then, what do we have? Wilhelm Reich, years ago, in speaking to the young communists in Berlin in 1936, during the rise of the Third Reich, said that the oppression of sexuality, and in particular the oppression of masturbation, is crucial to running a tyranny. Because if everybody doesn't feel ashamed, if everybody doesn't have their secret sin, this thing that nobody must find out about them, like that they enjoy pleasure, whoa, how could this be? Then you wouldn't get soldiers to go out and kill people. And you know what? That may sound a little far-fetched, but I kind of agree with it. I would like to think that if we took this sexual revolution, that we are, all of us in this room are sexual revolutionaries. You understand this. You are the pioneers. You are carrying this revolution. And if we take this out and we change the world, which we are doing and have in my lifetime enormously, I learn new stuff all the time because the society's getting open enough that there's room for new stuff, you know? Am I out of time?
You're good. Give it a minute.
Okay. I don't really need more than a minute to say, go spread the word, because this is what's going to heal everything, I believe. I really do believe that when we share sexual energy, and particularly in this place, when we share sexual energy with groups, until we're in a room full of people, all of them coming and shouting and screaming and groaning and roaring and whatever they do. And the room is full of magic, is it not? Is that room not full of spirit? And are we not all connected in spirit? There, I'm preaching to the choir.
Thank you, Dossie. Deborah Taj Anapol, PhD, or Dr. Anapol, I suppose. Dr. Taj Anapol, PhD, is an explorer of the spaces where sex, spirit, sustainability, love, and ecology meet. Her tantric journey through inner and outer space is an ongoing process of discovery. She brings over 30 years of professional practice through her work as a seminar leader and relationship coach. Deborah is the author of Love Without Limits and Polyamory in the 21st Century, and I'm sure this is another person whose name you already know. Dr. Anapol.
Yeah, I was gonna get out from under it.
Oh, that's much better. Yeah. Okay.
So, I think I'm going to continue a bit with the Reichian theme that Dossie started on. How many of you know about Wilhelm Reich? Is that, okay, some of you. He's probably, you never know with these terms, but he's probably the first person to put together the words sexual and revolution. And he wrote a book called The Sexual Revolution, I think in the 30s, but it was in German, so it didn't get translated into English and to this country until the 50s. And so you may or may not know, we were all given a list of questions and said, pick maybe one of these to share about. And one of them was, are there people who have preceded you in your journey? And I'm becoming more and more aware as my journey has gotten longer and longer that Reid really, I don't know how he knew all the stuff he knew, but back in the 30s, he really intuited or discovered many of the things that are only now becoming proven, or you can't really prove anything through science. Do you know that? You can't prove anything through science, you can only disprove things. Yeah. But it's kind of being established now through scientific research that a lot of things he speculated about are true. And somehow the powers that be that didn't want a sexual revolution knew this. And you know what happened, you know how he died, you know what happened, the story of Reid. After being thrown out of the Communist Party and the fascist and the American democratic process, his books were burned in Russia and Germany and in the United States. He was put in prison where he died. So this is how much somebody did not want a sexual revolution. Why didn't they want a sexual revolution? I really don't think it was because they were concerned about our morality. As Dossie was suggesting, in order to control people, you have to suppress their sexuality. And if we are free, we naturally seek pleasure. Okay? If we're not programmed and shamed and conditioned away from our sexuality and away from pleasure, this is what's natural for us. And I don't think it's really a problem for people to enjoy sexuality and pleasure. It's a problem for them not to be slaves. That's where the problem is, from the point of view of those that have a different agenda than I have. So pleasure in and of itself is actually not revolutionary. I'm sorry to tell you, sex in and of itself is not really revolutionary. What's revolutionary is to throw off the conditioning that's turned us into slaves and robots. So I don't know how many of you know who I am. Anybody? I've sort of dropped out of sight for a while, but back in the 80s, when people were scurrying quickly to the suburbs and monogamy and away from sexuality, I decided it might be a good idea to encourage people to go for non-monogamy, which later became known as polyamory. And I think it's wonderful that people have more permission to have multiple partners. That's great, but it hasn't changed the world. And I sort of thought it was going to, like, it hasn't. All it's done is help people have nicer lives, which is, you know, that's a cool thing. But I want more than that. I want to see a revolution, like a serious revolution, like getting back if you go back, but getting into our natural state. And so that's why I'm focusing on teaching some work called pelvic heart integration, created by my friend and colleague Jack Painter. And it's very Reichian in nature, but synthesizes a lot of things, because Reich, among all of those great pioneers of psychotherapy and psychoanalysis, was the only one who had an interest and an intention to change people's characters. And why he wanted to change characters was because he had the theory that it is the personality that we've been conditioned into that keeps us enslaved. So I'm done.
That was an excellent last word.
Did you know that Dr. Queen used to be a dancer for Lusty Lady? The flapper skirt is made to shimmy.
I'm standing here because I'm going to
Thank you
carry
very
the
much,
mic.
Dr. Anapol. And I get the pleasure, the honest pleasure, to introduce Joni Blank. Hi, Joni. Another person who has been hacking your lives very actively for the past 40 years or so. Joni founded Down There Press, which was radical in itself to have a press that just wrote about sex. The book that perhaps became most famous would be Jack Moran's Anal Pleasure and Health. Does anybody know that book? It's the Bible for anal sex. It really is good. Everybody who's ever written since then has used that as a springboard to go off of. A publisher of sex-related books in 1975 when she started Down There Press. She later founded Good Vibrations, the second women-oriented sex toy business in the United States in 1977. Now that's a bit disingenuous because it was the first women-oriented sex toy business that would occasionally allow men in. It also had a tryout room. It was so amazingly radical that people talked about it all over the country.
Yes, and Dell didn't have a store. She had a mail order.
She had this upstairs on 54th, whatever it was. She was one of the first volunteers at San Francisco Sex Information. Are you noticing a theme here in the room? And is known for her inventions of the butterfly vibrator and the intimate art tattoos. Joni Blank also wrote a very fascinating book called Femalia.
Write it. It's got pictures. Put it together, though.
Publish my portrait.
Mine too.
And I'm in there too. Yeah, did y'all recognize us?
By the way, if anybody ever asks you who knows about this book, which by the way is the only one of my books that's still in print, if Joni's picture pussy is in here, you can say, I request that you say, I don't know. It's fine with me that you know, but that's because I essentially told you. I don't want you to tell other people. Please. I have a reputation to uphold.
But mine's in there.
You don't even have to tell them that I appeared with my tits practically naked. It's kind of fun since I'm probably the oldest person in this room. Is anybody else over 75? 75 or more? I am the oldest person in this room. So, I decided not to answer any of your questions, Robert.
Of course.
You gave us the option not to. Although I thought they were great questions.
They're not my questions.
Well, whoever dreamed them up. I actually want to talk about some mainstream stuff, okay? Because I think probably that the stuff that I'm proudest of is not the fact that one of you bought your third dildo at Good Vibrations, or that you own all of my books. You know, you guys are with it. You're San Francisco. At least you're either visiting here or you come from around here, and you're young for the most part. You've got it all together. But the people I'm interested in, and I was interested in from the beginning with both my books and with the store and the information they gave as well as the stuff that they sold there, was the woman who lives in the Midwest. She's married, she has 2 children, she's been married for 15 years, and because she read something in this book or ordered a toy from Good Vibrations and brought it home, she is finally able to tell her husband that when they have sex, she would like it if he would pay a little attention to her clitoris. When she was never able to say that before. You know, that's so much more important to me than selling all of you aficionados one more sex toy, although I'm glad we're here to do that for you guys. So, at one point when one of my business advisors, when Down There Press started a couple of years before I opened the store, the first store, and one of my business advisors said to me, this was several years into it, said, if you want to do anything in this world, if you want your business to succeed, you've got to drop the publishing because it's not making any money. And I said to him, the publishing, the store is how I support my publishing habit. So don't give me that stuff. At one point I worked at the sex counseling program for a little while before I even wrote my first book, or did my first book, which was the playbook for women about sex. I have a hand-lettered copy of the first edition with me if any of you want to look at it. What was I saying? Let's see. What happens when you're 75 is you can't remember where you are, even if you're not smoking anything. Okay, I remember what he said. So he said I had to drop it. So I was thinking about when I would sort of decided what to do next after they laid me off of the sex counseling program. They let off a bunch of us because we didn't have PhDs and they became part of a different department in the medical school and we had to have PhDs to be in there. I was thinking now, there are a lot of ways to get information out. And to work with people around sexuality, the most intense and deep thing I could do would be to be a sex therapist, where I work with a few people with a great deal of depth. The next thing I could do would be a teacher of sex education classes where I meet more people. Another thing I could do, and I did that for a while in Skyline College in the adult education part. And then the next thing I could do would be to have a store, and lots of people come in the store and buy stuff. And the thing I could do the most, that would reach the most people, would be books, because they can go everywhere, and they have. So at the time Down There Press sort of ceased to exist, which was about 6 years ago, something like that. Down There Press had 26 books in print. 9 of them were mine, and Playbook for Women and Playbook for Men About Sex were out of print, so 7 of them were mine. Mine either edited or written by me. And I brought some of these along to show you guys. I want to tell you a little anecdote about anal pleasure and health. The very first edition of Anal Pleasure and Health was like this. Here's the cover. Had a dust jacket on it, but it was a paperback, and this was why, so you could read it on the bus. Everybody thought I was crazy, but I mean the printer never heard of a paperback book with a dust jacket. I'm happy to announce, for those of you who don't know it, that Last Gasp of San Francisco is now publishing Femalia. Yay. It was out of print for a long time, and the people who took over Down There Press, who bought Down There Press, did do Carol's book, Exhibitionism for the Shy, and a few of other books, and Anal Pleasure and Health, fortunately, so it's still available. Decided they didn't want to redo any of my books, except this one. They thought they might until they found out that it was going to cost them a bunch because of the color pictures, and they decided, nah, I don't want to do it. So Ron Turner, who actually owns Last Gasp, actually approached me, and I said, I'd like to publish Femalia, and I said, please! So it's back in print. It sold about 55,000 copies in the first few years of its existence. This is another book that sold really well. Anal Pleasure and Health was the bestseller by far of all the books ever that Down There Press published. This is a kid's first book about sex. Some of you have never seen this. Some of you who don't have any kids in your life or don't have any kids of your own might never have seen this, but I hope you do get a chance to look at it. I got really frustrated. Some of you maybe have known that there was a thing called a Playbook for Kids About Sex. This is essentially the same book, but it's not in workbook form, which means it can be read to younger children. So it's cool to have a sex book that's written for 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. It's still the only one. I mean, nobody's even dreamed about doing that. Oh yeah, there's some books about reproduction. Somebody said once, little kids ask us about reproduction and we answer them about sex. And then when they ask us about sex, we answer them about reproduction. My last revolutionary act, because Robert has given me the signal, moment revolution, is that I'll probably think of something else if I have a whole minute. I've made both this book and the Playbook for Kids About Sex, which I also have a copy of here, available for free download on my website. So I want it out there. I don't care if anybody pays for it. I'd be glad to show and tell about all of these.
Strangulate you guys.
Anybody wants to know all the details.
Ask her back and forth.
So I was 15 years old and I went to Fairfield High School out there on the edge of the Central Valley. And I met in a backyard with a whole bunch of other kids at the time. We were deciding what we were going to do. All the queer kids were in a backyard. There were like 14 of us from the high school. And we were saying, are we going to protest the war? Are we going to work on gay rights? What are we going to do? And we had a schism. And I ended up protesting the war. And apparently you were in another backyard and you got gay rights. Tommi Avicolli Mecca is a longtime queer activist, writer, and performer who was part of the Gay Liberation Front, thank you, and the queer sexual revolution in Philadelphia in the early 1970s. He's the editor of Smash the Church, Smash the State, the early years of gay liberation of city lights. It's an honor to have you tonight. Thank you.
Actually, if the truth be told, I was also in the yard having sex. 12 years old, with a really gorgeous other 12-year-old Italian boy in my neighborhood. He initiated me, and then at 16 I continued with a Sicilian boy who was, every girl in the neighborhood wanted him, but guess who got him? Not to brag. But meanwhile, gender fluidity, which is about one of the questions, to answer one of the questions, gender fluidity is something I have always known, and yet didn't always know that I knew, especially since I grew up in Catholic school in the late 50s and early 60s. A nun in school once told my mother that I was too much like a girl, and she considered that a bad thing. I didn't, but she did. She told my mother that I draped my sweater over my shoulders like a girl. And I had no fucking idea what that meant. But it was a big deal to her. She also once yelled at me in class in front of all the other kids because I was staring too much at the other boys' faces. And it's true, I was, because they were fucking gorgeous. I went to a school that was like 95% Italian. She said that if I continued doing it, people would get the wrong idea. Well, duh, sister. The wrong idea was the right idea. I was queer. And there was no debating it. I was fucking queer. So as I said, my first sex was at 12 in an alley after this neighborhood boy and I stole a copy of Playboy because he wanted to stare at the tits. And I wanted to stare at something else. And I got to. I used to dress up in my mother's clothes, and I fantasized about being a girl and having sex with the boys in the neighborhood. When I came out, which was 43 years ago, this month, I don't know, something like that, who can remember? I'm only 61, but the memory starts to go. When I came out, first thing I did was to get into drag, and I started doing drag as, can anybody guess?
A priest.
Barbra Streisand. You got it. Barbra Streisand, because when I suggested to this, I was in this drag troupe, and when I suggested that I do Judy Garland, they looked at me and said, honey, Judy Garland? So I became Barbra Streisand and Bette Midler. It was the nose, okay? You know, what can I say? And let me tell you, in case you don't know, doing drag was risky back in 1970 and 71 because it was illegal to do drag. You had to wear 2 pieces of men's clothes. If not, you could be arrested, and people were arrested. So, you know, we were literally risking our lives. And when you got arrested for things like that, your name was published in the newspaper the next day, along with your address and your employer. the name of your employer, so that they guaranteed that you would get fired and ostracized from your family. Yes, absolute truth. I also had this habit of shocking guys that I picked up at 13th and Locust, which was the drag strip. It was because I needed to earn the rent money somehow. So I would go out in the corner like a lot of the other girls. And I would shock the guys because when they took me home, they expected me to be a bottom. Not. There was nothing bottom about me. And they learned the hard way that they were going to be on the bottom. Many a straight guy who picked me up got quite a shock when we got into bed. I also got to enjoy public sex. 1 minute already, wow. Also got to enjoy public sex and everything. So to rush ahead, gender fluidity, wow. I helped start a transgender group. So basically, to answer another question, there is no sexual revolution without the queer revolution, without the queer part. Because the reality is that without questioning gender roles, without queer sex and all the great things we bring, like we brought S&M. We were the really ones who brought S&M into the limelight. Sorry, folks, but it was us. We brought all that shit. S&M, kinky sex, it all came from us, folks. We were the ones who put it out there and really got it started in public eye. Right. Polyamory, everything. Oh, believe me, polyamory. Yes, I know what to do. So without the gay part of the sexual revolution, it's boring. Because we're looking at traditional gender roles, we're looking at male and female only, we're looking at all that same old stuff that we've been taught. We're the ones who bring in all the really kinky, interesting stuff, and the gender bending, and anybody can be any gender they want. We started that, and I know young people today like to think that they started the gender bending and the we can be any gender we want and fuck the binary gender system, but you know what? We did it. We did it. So don't forget that we were the ones fucking gender 43 years ago. And I'm proud to say we led the way. And I'm really proud when I see young people so fluid about gender. But honey, we were there and we were the ones who pioneered it, okay? So don't forget it.